Greetings, YouTube. I am known for having particularly vivid dreams. Lucid dreaming is something I do on fairly often, and when I have dreams, I use sets. So when I go to a school, it's the same school. When I go to a mall, it's the same mall. I go to a pet shop, I go to the same pet shop. And pet shops pop in my dreams fairly frequently. I used to work at one. When I go to gaming stores, there are two that I go to. One which is an emulation of the one that used to exist in my town on the main drag, and another which seems so damn real. I'm always convinced to myself that I've been there, but I haven't. And I'm convinced it's in Maine, on the second floor of an '80s style strip mall. Um, but yeah, I've never been there. But I would be really thrilled to find it someday. And a lot of the time, I'm also dreaming about home. Now, I say home in quotes because the home isn't the same place, but it has the same components, which is me, my wife, and the cats. We're not always the same people in appearance, and the cats aren't always the same cats in appearance. But those components always exist. A couple and their cats living somewhere. Once it was a ranch, which is weird. I've never lived in a ranch. Um, but a lot of the time it's apartment units. Usually either as me as a renter, so it's like me as a younger person, or the present where I owned the building. In fact, one time it was like a 24 unit building built in like the early part of the 20th century, and it was in excellent condition. And if I had a building like that, I would be very wealthy and I would never have to work and I would be very happy. Um, but one of the things that I have in those dreams about home is that I frequently find or remember that spaces exist that slip my mind. So I'll like open a door and there's a bedroom. And I'm like, oh yeah, we haven't opened this place up in years. And it'll even have that kind of a slightly stale smell of worm that's been closed up for a while has. And whenever I do that and I discover new spaces in the place I live, there's always that, aha, yeah, this has always been here. And it's a metaphor for my capacity for growth because there's new spaces for me to move into. And that aha moment played a role in the dream I had recently about home. And this was a little different though, because it was me and my wife, modern day, and our cats, actually our three cats, living in an apartment in a building that we owned. It was a different apartment because it had bright sunny windows in the bedroom, which I despise. I use blackout curtains in my bedroom my sleep days. Yeah, don't like bright sunny bedrooms. My wife, however, would love to have one. So she would be very happy with what I dreamed about because that would make her very pleased. But we also had two other pets. And those two other pets were snakes, as the title of this video had probably given you a clue. And when I dreamed about the snakes, like they appeared in my dream, it was an aha moment. Like, oh yeah, I've always had these snakes in my dreams. I just forgot about it somehow. But they've always been here, which was a little odd. And the snakes themselves were very different. One was a ball python. Now, ball pythons are excellent snakes if you want to get into owning a snake. They've been domesticated for decades. They don't get overly large. They've been hand-reared for generations. They're good, solid options for people that want to get into owning a snake. I used to own a Burmese python. They're a little more aggressive. Um, they get bigger, and they're more of a medium grade type of snake that you want to get into snakes. But yeah, ball pythons, excellent choice if you want to get into snakes. And the other snake we owned was a Diamondback Rattler, which is a far more exotic pet to keep. But there are people who keep them and people who keep them for research and for venom collection and things like that. But it's not a common thing to have for a pet in your average apartment. Now, the really weird thing is both of the snakes in my dream were free range. They just moved around the home at will. We had snake-proofed the house. I'm not sure how you do that. Taken from someone who had to fish a python out of a top of a stove once. That was fun. Um, but we snake-proofed the house. And both of them being 6 foot, that would make it a lot easier to snake-proof because they can't get into really tiny places, but they can still get themselves into places you don't want them to be. And both those types of snakes, Diamondback Rattlers and ball pythons, get into that 6 foot range, though both of that would be near their maximum size. They don't tend to get a lot bigger than that in either of those cases. Um, I know that people will probably tell you about, will probably have examples of rattlers that get bigger, but 6 foot is a big rattlesnake. Um, and everyone in the home got along. There was no strife in the home. Well, the python would cause no problems at all. The cats are well outside the range of a prey animal for a ball python. Pretty much anything more than 3 times the size of a constrictor's head is, or actually any kind of snake's head, is not something they're going to think of as food. They just aren't. It's something they can't eat, and they would only attack it in self-defense. They're not going to be going after it for lunchtime. Uh, and in fact, at one point in the dream, there are 2 cats and the rattlesnake on the bed in a group together in the sun, just chilling out. 3 little circles of animals, 2 with fur and 1 with scales. And it seemed perfectly normal to me in the dream. Well, that stood out to me. The free-range snakes, the snakes that had, always been there, yet I don't remember them. So I'm like, okay, this represents something, just like the extra rooms represent growth potential within my head. The snakes represent something. And talking about this is emotionally difficult for me. I can actually feel a pain in the left side of my brain, which is the type of pain I get when I have, type of headache I get when I'm talking about or dealing with emotional topics. So this was an important one. You see, the boa, the ball python rather, the ball python represents the kind of things that you have in your life that people think are a problem, but aren't. The ball python is never going to cause you hassles, ever, or anybody else. No human is in danger from a ball python. You're going to have to really go out of your way to even get one to bite you. All right? But lots of people are afraid of snakes. So they see a ball python, they're going to freak out. Just like lots of people freak out about things they don't need to freak out about. There are things that you just don't need to concern yourself with. And the risk to your health by a ball python would be one of those things. So what does the rattlesnake represent? Well, the rattlesnake represents the things you should be concerned about, but that you have to accept if you're going to interface with the world. If you are going to live, you have to accept that there are certain things you can't do anything about. You can be prepared, but you can't control them, and you just have to accept them. And a lot of people confuse those two things, just like they confuse one type of snake with another. They think all snakes are venomous, and only about 20% of them are. And they think all snakes are dangerous to humans, and the number of snakes that are dangerous to humans is very small. There are lots of venomous snakes that aren't lethal to humans. There are snakes that have rear fangs as opposed to front fangs. They can still give you an injection, and I've been bitten by a venomous rear fang snake and felt the tingle of sense of reaction from the venom, though it is not strong enough to do real harm to a human. But people are still afraid, and they conflate the things they don't need to concern themselves with the things that they do need to concern themselves with. And if you spend all of your time worried about both of those categories, you're going to be stressed a lot. You're going to be anxious a lot. And it's quite possible that you're not going to be paying attention to the really important things when you should be. because you've just got so many things on your mind. You're being overwhelmed. It's just a shotgun blast of anxiety. And when that happens, things get past us. There's no way we can account for every single thing in the world that we are anxious about, particularly when there's lots of things that we don't need to be anxious about. An example of that is when anxiety tells us that everyone hates us. The reality is that everybody out there is wrapped up in their own heads. You will be very lucky if they're even aware of your existence. Even the people that are in your life, they are wrapped up in their heads. They may love you, but they're not thinking about you as much as you think they are. They are not judging you the way they think you think they are. They are judging themselves just like you are judging yourself. We're all busy being wrapped up inside our own heads. And to assume that other people are spending their time thinking about us in a negative way is foolish and arrogant. But there are things we should be concerned about. But I get intrusive thoughts. Some of them are on the semi-realistic spectrum, like being concerned that my wife may die in a car accident. That's a concern. People die in car accidents every day. But every time she leaves the house, I think it's the last time I'll ever see her. And that's taking it too far. I shouldn't be thinking that. I've had absurd intrusive thoughts. Ones that make no sense. Like being the last human alive on the planet and looking at items around me as I interface with those items and think, would this still be good in 3 years? What would I use to replace it when it wasn't? Would I still have this type of technology that would operate for me? Could I keep the level of infrastructure I need to keep going to be comfortable? Those are intrusive thoughts that don't help at all. They're the ball python. Car accidents, that's the rattlesnake. It's a real thing, but you have to accept it because otherwise we're never going to be able to leave the house. But even if you stay in your house all the time, fires happen. Jet engines fall out of the sky. You're going to die. And we have to accept those things. And it's hard sometimes, really hard sometimes. And I understand that. And I wish it weren't so, but it is. But in my dream, everybody got along. And I had placed the fear of things in their proper perspective. I've never been afraid of ball pythons. And I have a lot of respect for rattlesnakes, which I have encountered in my life. Didn't get bit. Wasn't stupid. And the snake and I parted ways without any interaction that was bad for anybody. Thankfully, it was a juvenile snake, but they still have venom and they can still be quite dangerous. But to a snake, 6 foot or less, you're just a warm tree. It doesn't see you as food, and it may potentially see you as a threat, but if you've never ever heard it, or you're not moving or not looking at it, you're just a warm tree. The snake isn't worrying about a lot of stuff like that. Snakes have that advantage. They don't seem to have anxiety as much as we do. So be aware of the things you should be concerned about, and be aware about the things that you shouldn't be concerned about. And try to keep those things separate. And try to not fret about the ball python stuff. And try to react reasonably to the Diamondback Rattler stuff. Because there are things in life that we can't escape. But if we accept them and we plan accordingly, they're not going to control our lives. And I got to tell you, that sounds pretty damn good to me.